Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Bai Xiaochun seemed like he had already descended into madness. He had received numerous injuries, and his eyes were completely bloodshot. Behind him, the ground was littered with corpses, and the soul cultivators ahead of him were completely shaken. To them, Bai Xiaochun seemed insane and completely bereft of the desire to live. Despite having killed quite a number of soul cultivators, he was clearly seriously injured. However, he didn't seem to care about any such injuries as he strode forward, shouting, "Die!" Suddenly, an old soul cultivator appeared in front of him, reaching out with a hand that was already decaying into blackness. By the time his hand was extended, it looked like nothing but ash and bones as he tried to grab Bai Xiaochun's chest, apparently to rip out his heart. At the same time, 8 other soul cultivators in the area drew so deeply upon themselves that blood began to ooze out of their eyes, ears, noses, and mouths. Soul power battered Bai Xiaochun's frigid qi as they charged an attack. If they could just slow down his momentum, then perhaps their combined force would be enough to destroy him in body and soul. In the face of such danger, Bai Xiaochun laughed viciously and allowed the old man's pitch-black bone hand to slam into his chest. The old man's eyes lit up with delight, and just when he was about to grab down, his face fell as he realized that it felt like his hand had run into a chunk of iron. Heart-pounding, the old man made to retreat. However, that was when Bai Xiaochun lunged forward, headbutting the man in the face. As the man's head was crushed, he screamed and tried to fight back, and yet, the frigid qi had suppressed even his quasi-nascent soul cultivation base, and a moment later, he was dead in body and soul. After killing the old man, Bai Xiaochun spun, his hands flashing in a double-handed incantation gesture to summon a gale-force wind that blasted against the other 8 soul cultivators. Blood sprayed out of his mouth, and yet he shot like lightning toward the 8 enemies, landing vicious fist strikes onto their chests that sent them tumbling backward like kites with their strings cut. All of this takes a bit of time to describe, but actually occurred within about 10 breaths of time. During that time, he had already killed at least 100 soul cultivators and many savage giants. Behind him, the ground was soaked with blood and gore. As his frigid qi faded away, he staggered a bit to the side, where some of the cultivators of the 5 legions reached out to prop him up. Those cultivators' eyes were bright red. After witnessing Bai Xiaochun's brave ferocity, they were also pushed deeper into madness, and took it upon themselves to protect him as they again charged forward. Bai Xiaochun's face was pale white, and he was having a hard time breathing. However, with the help of the other cultivators, he managed to grit his teeth and put a godly vestige pill into his mouth. Then he pulled out a few bottles of spirit alcohol to restore his spiritual energy. The main reason he had been willing to sustain such injuries moments ago was because he had the godly vestige pill to fall back on. As soon as the miraculous pill entered his mouth, heat washed through him, and in the blink of an eye, all of his injuries were being healed. Meanwhile, the cultivators continued to charge toward the shield, which was now only about 1,500 meters away. Along the way, other nearby cultivators had noticed what was happening, and had been hurrying over to join them the entire time, causing their numbers to swell to over 10,000. Of course, they weren't the only large group of cultivators who had managed to group together. There were 7 or 8 other such groups, all of whom were in formation and trying to reach the shield. Furthermore, all of them were rallying around a powerful figure of some sort. And of course, Bai Xiaochun was just such a leader. However, he was a bit different from the other core figures who had rallied troops around them. Those people had long since grown in prestige and power. In contrast, Bai Xiaochun had slaughtered his way into fame in a very short time. He seemed to lack any fear of death, and was willing to fight back against hundreds of soul cultivators and savage giants. Because of that, he had gained the complete approval of everyone around him. As his group blasted through layer after layer of opposition, and got closer and closer to the shield, one of the nascent soul tribal chiefs finally used some unknown method to make it past the destructive beams of light being sent out by the huge eye. At first, the tribal chief was only about 30 meters tall, but as he closed in, he rapidly grew in height to 300 meters tall. Every step he took caused his energy to rise to even more shocking heights, even causing a powerful wind to sweep about in all directions. As he sped toward Bai Xiaochun, cries of alarm rang out from the cultivators. "Time to die, devil Bai," he howled in rage, his voice echoing like thunder. The mere sound of his voice was such that the cultivators who had been clustered protectively around Bai Xiaochun began to tremble and cough up blood. With that, the tribal chief lunged forward, shoving his mountain-like hand forward and unleashing pressure that the cultivators of the 5 legions could not fight back against. From the look of it, there was nothing anybody could do to stop this chief. Even as Bai Xiaochun stood there, supported by another cultivator, he looked up, and his pupils constricted. Nascent soul, there was no time for hesitation. He had already surmised that the wildlanders wouldn't let him escape so easily, which was why he had held back so many of his other trump cards. Although the scene which was playing out was shocking, it was by no means unexpected. Gritting his teeth, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture and then dashed forward to meet the tribal chief, frigid chi swirling around him, his undying live forever technique on full display. In the blink of an eye, the two of them met, and an intense boom filled the air. Blood sprayed out of Bai Xiaochun's mouth, and he almost felt like the pressure and might of the nascent soul stage alone was enough to crush him into oblivion. However, the tribal chief didn't come out unscathed. Blood oozed out of the corners of his mouth, and his eyes shone with incredulity as he staggered backward several steps. What level is your cultivation base? You're not injured? In his shock, the tribal chief asked 2 questions in one breath. From what he had been able to tell, this devil Bai was actually on equal footing with himself, which seemed like a complete impossibility. Bai Xiaochun wiped the blood off of his mouth and said, "My cultivation base level? The level that can kill you." A quick glance confirmed that the beams of light from the giant eye would definitely keep the other tribal chiefs at bay temporarily. However, if he didn't take care of this tribal chief quickly, then death would be just around the corner. Eyes flickering, he decided to completely throw caution to the wind. Quickly performing a double-handed incantation gesture, he shoved his hands down toward the ground. Water swamp. Instantly, ripples spread out through the air, causing water vapor to spring out of nowhere as the entire area was transformed into a huge swamp. When that swamp appeared, the tribal chief's face fell, and the profound sense of deadly crisis that inundated him caused his heart to begin to pound. This devil Bai is very strange. The chief's eyes flickered with killing intent. Well aware that he couldn't let Bai Xiaochun finish using this technique, he suddenly lunged forward. "You're dead." "Nope," Bai Xiaochun retorted. "You're dead." With that, he flung his hands over his head, causing his hair and his blood-stained garments to whip about as energy surged in all directions. Kingdom, rumble. The lands quaked as a massive spike shot out from the ground, then a second, and then a third. One after another, they rose up like mountains, provoking looks of wide-eyed shock from everyone on the battlefield. The tribal chief had been in the middle of lunging forward, and was stabbed directly by one of the spikes. Blood sprayed out of his mouth, and a look of utter shock appeared on his face. Frigid chi poured into him as he looked down at the spike, and the swamp around him. From what he could tell, that water vapor hid some shockingly enormous beast. And yet, things weren't over yet. Bai Xiaochun leapt into the air above the tribal chief, spreading his arms wide as he howled, "Living mountain incantation." In the blink of an eye, rocks began to form around him until he looked like a huge stone golem. With the power of a living mountain, he bore down on the tribal chief and then crushed him with vicious ruthlessness. Elder brother Zhao can kill nascent soul experts, and so can Bai Xiaochun. Below the tribal chief was the water swamp kingdom. He was surrounded by frigid chi, and was looking up at Bai Xiaochun's living mountain power. The combination of all of those factors created a deadly gambit that was Bai Xiaochun's last hope for survival. These were his most powerful trump cards. Early on, he had assumed that he would face a moment of ultimate danger such as this, and as such, he had been holding back a bit of fleshly body power, and even some of his spiritual power, all for a moment like this. Furthermore, because of his godly vestige pills, he was much more confident of being able to survive. Therefore, he also knew that he had to go all out. Although he feared death, in a moment like this when the flame of his life force could be snuffed out at any moment, such fear was useless. If he wanted to keep himself from dying, he had to risk his life. Throw caution to the wind. That was his line of thinking. As he descended, the maddened tribal chief also drew upon every ounce of power he could to fight back against this unprecedentedly deadly crisis. The most unbelievable aspect to the entire situation was that he was a nascent soul expert. Although he was only in the early nascent soul stage, that still counted as nascent soul. And it didn't matter how strong Bai Xiaochun was, the chief could sense that he was only in the late core formation stage, not even the great circle. Despite that, despite the fact that this was a late core formation cultivator, he imparted such a sensation of imminent danger that the chief couldn't help but feel both humiliated and terrified. However, there was no time for thought or planning, nor any time for discussion. The tribal chief's cultivation base power erupted out, bolstering his fleshly body to the point where he looked like a heavenly king. The savage giants were different from soul cultivators in that they focused mostly on fleshly body cultivation. Although this tribal chief had some magical techniques at his disposal, the true foundation of his power was fleshly body strength. "Wanna kill me?" the chief roared, throwing both his hands above him to smash into the living mountain incantation. "None other," Bai Xiaochun roared back, unleashing everything that his living mountain incantation, water swamp kingdom, and frigid master powers were capable of. Boom! Wind blasted out in all directions, and brightly colored light flashed in heaven and earth. The entire battlefield trembled, and cultivators from both sides of the conflict all simultaneously stared in the same direction to see what would happen. The eyes of the other tribal chiefs were glued to the scene, and at the same time, their minds were battered with waves of shock. Even the necromancers and the top experts from the 5 legions were all looking over at Bai Xiaochun. He was the complete and utter center of attention. As everyone looked on, a heaven-rending, earth-crushing boom ripped through the air. Then, a moment later, the frigid master aura began to fade, and the water swamp kingdom spikes began to vanish. Up above in the air, Bai Xiaochun was trembling and coughing up blood as he tumbled backward. Cracking sounds rang out as his living mountain form cracked and crumbled. Soon, his true form was revealed, and after coughing up another mouthful of blood, he popped another godly vestige pill into his mouth. When he looked up, he didn't even take the time to see the outcome of his attack, but instead, bolted toward the shield. At the same time, the fading effects of the living mountain incantation, water swamp kingdom, and frigid master aura slowly revealed the nascent soul tribal chief. At first, he stood there completely unmoving, but then a breeze swept past, and he trembled. Then the chief slowly crumbled and transformed into ash, starting from his feet and head, and slowly spreading to the rest of his body. He had been completely destroyed, from his physical form down to his soul. In the moment of his death, his eyes continued to shine with terror and defiance. And yet, nothing could stop him from fading away into the wind. The battlefield went silent for a long moment before panting sounds began to rise up, and then a huge commotion. Impossible, heavens! A late core formation cultivator just killed a nascent soul expert. He wasn't an ordinary nascent soul expert either, he was a tribal chief from one of the Wildlands tribes. His fleshly body power must have been shocking. This devil Bai. Damn it, not only did he come out alive, but he actually ended his opponent. What brilliance! Even as the exclamations of astonishment rang out, the more than 10,000 cultivators in the area began to cry out in joy and cluster around Bai Xiaochun as they all shot toward the shield. The other giants and soul cultivators in the area were completely shaken. As Bai Xiaochun barreled toward them, their faces turned ashen with fear, and they scattered, not daring to provide even the slightest bit of resistance. Bai Xiaochun had put far too many giants and soul cultivators to death. He had even killed one of the tribal chiefs. How could any of them even think of trying to stand in his way? The enormous eye began to send beams of light out with even more rapidity, making it impossible for any other tribal chief to get closer. Meanwhile, Bai Xiaochun's own battalion was also speeding in his direction. They had been trying to reach him the entire time, intent on joining and guarding him. After all, Bai Xiaochun had always treated them well, plus, his current achievements in battle ensured that he would almost certainly be promoted in the army. How could they possibly be anything but awe-inspired? As for the spell formation shield, it continued to bulge out toward him, to the point where all of the savages and soul cultivators, and even the tribal chiefs could see that he would be within that shield in moments. In the moment he did, a tremor ran through him, and all of the valor and bravery from moments before vanished, to be replaced by lingering fear. His face was ashen, and he was panting as he turned back to look at the countless savages gnashing their teeth beyond the shield. You just wait for Lord Bai to come back and show you a thing or two. Inside of the shield, Bai Lin and the other top experts were still fighting the necromancer souls. Unsightly expressions could be seen on the faces of the necromancers, many of whom had received grievous injuries. As soon as Bai Xiaochun made it back inside the shield, the necromancer souls exchanged glances and made as if to charge in his direction. And yet, how could Bai Lin and the other top experts let that happen? Without the slightest hesitation, all of the major generals, as well as other nascent soul experts from the 5 legions, leapt forward to fight them. Moments later, the necromancer souls scattered, not in an attempt to get at Bai Xiaochun, but to flee back outside of the shield. They all headed in different directions, and although some of them were close enough to Bai Xiaochun that they might have been able to send a casual attack in his direction, considering how many cultivators surrounded him, and considering how he had fought the tribal chief, they were so frightened that they just left. Bai Xiaochun maintained full vigilance as all of this happened. Soon, the necromancers were gone, and he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Surrounded by all the cultivators he had led off of the battlefield, he began to speed back toward the Great Wall. When he finally reached the wall itself, he finally seemed to run out of energy. Heart-pounding, he thought back to everything which had occurred during the fight, and was left with the sensation that he had barely escaped with his life. Eventually, as evening gave way to night, Chen Hichan and the red-garbed young woman finally stopped fighting. The day of battle had finally come to an end, and the only thing left behind on the battlefield were mounds of corpses. The wildlands had suffered grievous casualties, and yet, so had the 5 legions. After a night of rest, the fighting resumed in the morning, just as fierce as before. 3 months passed, during which time the fighting raged. At the same time, the savage giant's army continued to receive reinforcements, and it was the same with the 5 legions. Cultivators from World City were continually being sent to bolster the forces at the Great Wall, and ensure that their overall strength didn't lessen. During the 3 months, one name after another rose to prominence within the 5 legions, all thanks to the battle credit they had accumulated. Of course, Bai Xiaochun was the most spectacular of them all. Although he never went back to the front lines during the 3 months which had passed, his bravery and veins of steel during the initial battle caused the more than 10,000 cultivators who he had led to safety to view him with reverence and awe. Furthermore, his battle credit continued to rise, although no one in the 5 legions could determine the exact extent of it. Meanwhile, a similar situation occurred among the Wildlands forces. Because of the fierce fighting, one powerful expert after another rose to fame, the vast majority of them being necromancers. A month before, as the battles seemed to be winding down, the necromancers seemed to abandon the tactic of using souls as their weapons, and instead began to fight personally on the battlefield. When they did, the attacks they unleashed shocked everyone present. That was because the magical items they wielded, despite not being at the level of precious treasures, were all decorated with a minimum of 7 spirit enhancement designs. There were even some of them that had received 10-fold spirit enhancements. Most shocking of all were 3 particular necromancers who were in the late nascent soul stage. Their magical items unleashed shocking power that not only enabled them to easily kill other nascent soul cultivators, but also allowed them to challenge quasi-diva realm experts like Bai Lin. Each of those 3 necromancers wielded magical items with 13 silver designs on them. Shockingly, they were magical items with 13-fold spirit enhancements. Many of the cultivators from the legions were shocked by this, especially Bai Xiaochun. In fact, it was so unbelievable to him that he personally went up to the wall to see for himself. How is this possible? Bai Xiaochun almost couldn't believe what he was seeing. In the lands of Heavenspan, the most advanced spirit enhancement he had ever seen was 10-fold. But now, in a completely unexpected turn of events, he was looking at magical items which had been enhanced far beyond that. There's something strange going on. Could it be that the Wildlands harbors some mysterious secret regarding spirit enhancement? Even as he pondered the issue, he subconsciously cast his senses toward the turtle walk inside his finger. Most telling of all about the whole thing was that Bai Lin and the other most powerful experts didn't seem to find the matter unusual at all. It was almost as if they were used to seeing necromancers using such spirit-enhanced magical items. Furthermore, their eyes burned passionately at the sight of them, and they attacked with greater fervor than before, clearly in the hopes of getting their hands on one of the enhanced treasures. Apparently, for the generals and major generals, one of the key things they could gain from battle wasn't battle credit, but rather, the spirit-enhanced treasures of the necromancers. The fighting went on for another month, after which the Wildlands finally retreated. The Great Wall forces didn't chase after them. After all, the Great Wall had suffered extensive losses in this battle as well. Neither Chen Hichan nor the red-garbed young woman came out on top in their conflict, and in fact, both received similar injuries. It was only in the moment that the Wildlands armies began to retreat that Bai Xiaochun finally got a good look at the young woman in red. She wore a long red garment and had flowing black hair. She seemed very young, and was beautiful in a way that surpassed even Chen Manyao. Of greater significance, however, was her cultivation base, which made her radiate an air of nobility that would cause anyone who looked at her to feel their heart pounding in their chest. Of course, Bai Xiaochun didn't really care about any of that. At the moment, he was looking glumly at Li Hongming, who had come to the armory to visit Bai Xiaochun the very afternoon the fighting ended. Li Hongming had been a colonel to begin with, and still was, but had risen within the ranks of the colonels thanks to his accumulation of battle credit during the fighting. Xiaochun, you're famous now. Completely famous. According to the secret reports I saw, the Wildlands has increased the bounty on your head. Do you know what the reward is for your death? a diva beast soul. Although the reward is only one of them, and it's not clear what type, that's still something incredibly valuable. After all, if you can collect enough 5 elements diva beast souls to meet the requirements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, you can step into the nascent soul stage. Only people in the top 10 of the Wildlands execution list have rewards like that attached to their names. Congratulations, Xiaochun. You're already in the top 10. The only people even close to you on that list are nascent soul cultivators. In fact, you are the only core formation cultivator in the top 30. Devil Bai, that's what the Wildlanders call you now. Li Hongming was sincerely offering his congratulations to Bai Xiaochun, and had actually hurried over here just to tell him this news. However, Bai Xiaochun was left shaking in fear. A diva beast soul as a reward. Bai Xiaochun couldn't help but gasp in shock as his heart began to pound. He could only imagine how badly the savages and soul cultivators in the Wildlands would want to kill him now. Li Hongming was left sighing continuously in his heart. When he thought back to the time Bai Xiaochun had first arrived, it would have been impossible to predict that he would become so famous both inside and outside the Great Wall. The two of them chatted a bit more about some random things, until eventually Li Hongming could sense that Bai Xiaochun was feeling down. Finally, he patted his shoulder and left. Afterward, Bai Xiaochun sat down and sighed. Whatever. No matter where I go, I always put on a breathtaking performance. Worst case scenario, I just don't go outside the Great Wall after this. I'll stick around until the 10 years are up, and then head back to the sect. Only by comforting himself in this way could he somewhat still his pounding heart. And yet, his anxiety just wouldn't go away. Not only was he worried about the Wildlands soul cultivators trying to get the bounty on his head, but he also couldn't keep from being nervous about the other cultivators in the 5 legions. After all, his head was very valuable now. Thankfully, he didn't have to stew in his worries for too long. Now that the fighting was over, the promotions were being handed out. Many cultivators were being promoted from ordinary soldiers to the rank of lieutenant or captain. As for Bai Xiaochun, he was one of only 2 captains who were promoted to colonel. Now that he was a colonel, he could occupy both the armory and his own personal colonel's command center. Furthermore, in addition to Zhao Long and the original battalion of 100 men, he would now command an additional 900 cultivators. It took a huge amount of battle credit to earn a promotion from captain to colonel, which made such promotions very uncommon as a result of only one battle. The other captain to receive a promotion to colonel had already been stationed in Great Wall City for 100 years. The only reason he had finally been able to get his promotion was because he was about to break through into the great circle of core formation, and had risked his life in countless battles. The truth was that despite how many soul cultivators Bai Xiaochun had cut down, and regardless of the fact that he had slaughtered a tribal chief, he still shouldn't have had enough battle credit to get promoted. The only reason he was now a colonel was because of his soul convergence pills and pill furnace bombs. In that fashion, he had advanced by leaps and bounds, and been promoted to colonel in one fell swoop. As an apothecary, he had invented soul convergence pills, which ended up changing the course of the battle. Furthermore, his exploding treasures also shocked everyone near and far. And then there was his battle prowess. After cutting down numerous soul cultivators, and even a tribal chief, it was clear that his fleshly body was similar to the nascent soul level. And although he wasn't a true nascent soul expert, he could obviously do things that ordinary core formation cultivators could not. In addition to all that, he had saved the lives of over 10,000 soldiers, causing countless cultivators to revere him. To top it all off, he was now in the top 10 on the Wildlands execution list. All of these various honors and glories were like a shockwave that rolled through all of Great Wall City. In addition, it caused the generals of the other 4 legions to suddenly view Bai Xiaochun as being vastly more important than he had been before. Whoever had Bai Xiaochun in their legion would not only have a valiant warrior, but would also have soul convergence pills and exploding pill furnaces. Plus, they would have someone who thousands upon thousands of other cultivators revered. He was really a comprehensive package. The generals of the other 4 legions were quite excited, and therefore, it was no surprise that on the evening in which Bai Xiaochun was promoted to colonel, a bright beam of light suddenly appeared outside of the armory. Within that beam of light was an old man wearing a pitch-black suit of armor. He pulsed with a black energy, and had the illusory image of a fierce tiger floating above his head. His eyes were bright red, and he seemed to pulse with demonic chi. Overall, he made a very terrifying sight. In addition to all that, he had a very profound cultivation base, being half a step into the diva realm. Heaven and earth trembled upon his arrival, and all of the cultivators in the armory looked up and then clasped hands in salute. It's the general of the black demons. Greetings, General. Zhao Long and his compatriots were shaken, and as for Bai Xiaochun, he had been in the middle of meditating when he felt the sudden pressure in the area. Walking out, he saw the general of the black demons hovering in midair. Bai Xiaochun had never interacted personally with the man, they had only seen each other on the battlefield. Feeling a bit surprised to see him here, Bai Xiaochun clasped hands and bowed. The old man laughed heartily as he landed in front of Bai Xiaochun, his eyes shining with approval and admiration. Grandmaster Bai, why don't you join the black demons? Whatever compensation they're giving you here, I'll triple it. Bai Xiaochun's jaw dropped. He had a lot of freedom in the skin flayers and hadn't planned to leave. However, this general's eyes burned as if with fire. Clearly, he really wanted Bai Xiaochun to agree to the proposition. Bai Xiaochun hesitated for a moment, and just when he was about to say something else, another beam of light appeared in the sky. Before anyone could say a word, a new voice rang out. Don't listen to him, Grandmaster Bai. Why don't you join the Bane Stars? Not only will I offer you 10 times your current compensation, but I can also guarantee that you won't be injured by the Wildlanders even a single time. I definitely won't let you end up in any critical situations such as those which unfolded before. Even as the words rang out, a middle-aged man in a crimson robe appeared. He was very attractive, and had a warm smile that lacked even the hint of a bad temper. He was almost humble-looking. However, Bai Xiaochun had seen him fight in battle, and knew that his murderous aura was beyond comparison to anyone except for Bai Lin. You'll guarantee my safety? Bai Xiaochun blurted, his heart suddenly pounding. He had just been pondering the issue of how dangerous things were, so to hear the general of the Bane Stars make an offer like that instantly got him excited. When the general of the black demons saw Bai Xiaochun's expression, he instantly started to get nervous, and was just about to insert some words when, all of a sudden, a cold snort filled the air. The black demons and the Bane Stars are all stingy tightwads, Grandmaster Bai. What's the use of joining miserly legions like theirs? If you come to the savage butcherers, I'll increase your compensation by 20-fold. I'll also guarantee your safety, and get you any medicinal plant you need. The same goes for spirit alcohol and medicinal pills. Whatever cultivation resources you require will be at your disposal. A third beam of light appeared, and as it touched down, a tall, burly man came into view. The burly man wore a suit of heavy armor, and looked almost like a mountain. His eyes flickered with a brutal gleam as he glared at the old man and the middle-aged cultivator. The generals of the black demons and the Bane Stars glared back at him, and it almost looked like a fight might break out at any moment. Bai Xiaochun said, blinking a few times. Although he was very pleased by the fact that the generals of these 3 legions were competing over him, he had to conclude that the offer from the savage butcherers seemed the best of them all. However, it was in that very instant that another cold snort echoed out, along with a blast of wind that caused intense rumbling sounds to fill the air. Then, numerous bolts of lightning descended from the sky, which swirled together into the form of a white-haired cultivator. In the blink of an eye, he was standing there in Bai Xiaochun's courtyard, lightning crackling beneath his feet, transforming the entire courtyard into something like a lake of lightning. Of course, the lightning didn't harm Bai Xiaochun or his men. However, the faces of the other generals flickered as they were forced to rotate their cultivation bases to keep themselves from harm. What do you think you're doing, Master Soul Slaughterer? Shouted the burly man from the savage butcherers. What am I doing? Competing with you people, obviously. Grandmaster Bai, why not join the Soul Slaughterers? I can guarantee you 10 years of safety and 50 times your current compensation. Plus, I can ensure that you will be rich and taken care of after you go back to the sect. I'll give you access to all the medicinal plants and other resources you need, and I'll even give you a priceless nascent soul pill. All you have to do is nod your head yes, and I'll hand the pill over immediately. Even as he spoke, he lifted his right hand, which was holding a crystalline medicinal pill. The pill instantly erupted with a shocking medicinal aroma that Zhao Long and the others had no trouble identifying as that of a nascent soul pill. Nascent soul pills were one of the most important types of cultivation resources in existence at the Great Wall. They were even hard to get in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, and extensive records were kept on their distribution. They were second in value only to Diva Beast souls. In fact, most people actually valued them more than Diva Beast souls. After all, despite the fact that using Diva Beast souls to step into the nascent soul stage would lead to incredible power, it would only work if you possessed all 5 souls of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. However, any cultivator in the great circle of the core formation stage would have a good chance of achieving a breakthrough with a nascent soul pill. Although breaking through using that method came with certain downsides, such as being less powerful than someone who used Diva Beast souls, it was still the nascent soul stage. And besides, very few people would be able to build up a full collection of 5 elements Diva Beast souls. Not even Bai Xiaochun had been able to get his hands on a nascent soul pill since he had arrived in Great Wall City. As such, he knew how valuable they were, and here, this white-haired cultivator was holding one of them in his hand. All he had to do was nod his head, and he could have it. How could Bai Xiaochun not be excited about that? His eyes were burning with passion as he looked at the pill. Although he didn't actually plan to step into nascent soul using that method, the pill could still be very useful. With it, he could ascend to the great circle of core formation almost immediately. That would definitely save him a lot of time. The other 3 generals looked at the nascent soul pill, their hearts trembling. It wasn't that they didn't have nascent soul pills of their own to offer, they did. However, such pills were so valuable that they couldn't help but hesitate about what to do. The more Bai Xiaochun looked at that nascent soul pill, the brighter his eyes shone. Taking a deep breath, he glanced over at the other 3 silent generals, and decided that if he hesitated any longer, he might lose this chance. Just when he was about to nod, an enraged shout ripped through the air. Absolutely disgraceful. Screw off, fools. Damn it, how dare the 4 of you bastards show up here in Skinflayer's territory and try to steal my people. That's nothing more than a nascent soul pill. Ignore them, Xiaochun. I'll give you 3 nascent soul pills. It was none other than Bai Lin, his voice cracking like thunder as he appeared in front of Bai Xiaochun to stare furiously at the 4 other generals. As far as he was concerned, the fact that they had shown up in his territory to brazenly attempt to recruit one of his men was completely embarrassing. Thus, his murderous aura raged as he waved his sleeve, sending a blast of air rumbling toward the other generals. Shocked, Bai Xiaochun backed up, and as for Zhao Long and the others, they had long since fled. The 4 generals' faces fell. Clearly, none of them had expected Bai Lin to actually unleash an attack. They immediately drew upon the power of their cultivation bases, and were about to start fighting back, when all of a sudden, a beam of light shot out from the enormous eye atop the pagoda. The beam slammed down right in the middle of all 5 generals, forcing them to back away from each other. At the same time, Chen Hichan's ancient voice echoed out with icy coldness. You're dismissed, all of you. The 5 of you are generals, so start acting like it. Gritting his teeth, Bai Lin glared at the other 4 generals. The generals, fully aware that they were in the wrong, cleared their throats, then cast longing glances at Bai Xiaochun before turning and leaving. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times, looked around, and then turned his attention to Bai Lin. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he said, they came looking for me. Face grim, Bai Lin walked over to Bai Xiaochun. Xiaochun, those 4 bastards are real tricksters. Don't listen to them. You stay here with me. Don't worry, I'll keep you safe, and I'll keep you supplied with whatever medicinal plants you need. Compensation won't be a problem either, nor will nascent soul pills. With that, he winced a bit as he pulled 2 nascent soul pills out of his bag of holding and handed them over to Bai Xiaochun. I only have 2 at the moment. Take them. With a bit of time, I can come up with a way to get a 3rd. Inwardly, Bai Lin was cursing at the fact that he now needed to come up with yet another nascent soul pill. The truth was that they weren't impossible to acquire, but it always took a long time to save up enough resources to buy one. Bai Xiaochun took the 2 nascent soul pills, his heart quivering with anticipation. Then he looked back at Bai Lin, suddenly struck with how well the general was treating him. And then he thought about how he would be continuing to serve as the man's subordinate for some time, and his expression suddenly turned very serious. Shaking his head, he said, "What kind of person do you think I am, General? If I wanted to join one of the other legions, I could have agreed before you showed up. General, don't you understand why I was buying time? I can't afford to provoke those 4 generals. Therefore, I also couldn't simply refuse them. And that was why I was waiting for you to come take control of the situation." With that, he flicked his sleeve. Looking more serious than ever, he continued, "General, you have treated me with great kindness. How could I possibly cause difficulties for such a benefactor? 2 nascent soul pills are valuable enough on their own. I won't take a 3rd from you even if you offer it." With that, he clasped hands and bowed deeply in salute, feeling very pleased with himself. From what he could tell, his words just now had brimmed with righteous intent, and had been worded perfectly. Regardless of how much Bai Lin truly trusted what Bai Xiaochun had just said, he was still moved. After looking at Bai Xiaochun for a long moment, he realized that he was definitely the type of person who knew how to act properly in front of others. Taking a deep breath, he said, "Xiaochun, if possible, try to build up enough battle credit over the next 10 years to become a major general. If you can reach that rank, your status and position will be completely different. Even your river-defying sect's position will change for the better. When major generals return from the 5 legions to the sect, they become elders of the Hall of Steel Veins. That's a status that surpasses the position of anyone in any of the other halls. If you can reach that level, you would be in one of the most powerful groups in the entire Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. As long as you didn't ever betray the sect, you could do almost anything you wanted." Bai Lin didn't offer any more detailed explanation than that. After making a few more vague statements, he turned and left. Afterward, Bai Xiaochun thoughtfully walked back into his room. Then he pulled out his command medallion and checked how much battle credit was required to be promoted to Major General, and gasped. That much. He was left almost completely speechless. He had no idea how the other major generals had ever managed to get promoted. It took more than 100 times as much battle credit as it took to get promoted to colonel. That basically implied that it would take 100 battles such as the one he had just fought in to get that promotion. Well, forget that, then, he thought. I'll just stick with being a colonel. Feeling a bit discouraged, he shook his head and put his command medallion away. Then he pulled out a nascent soul pill, whereupon his eyes yet again began to shine. The great circle of core formation. Trying to keep calm, he set up some restrictive spells around his residence, and then told Zhao Long and the others that he would be going into secluded meditation. By the time all his preparations were complete, it was deep into the night. When everything was ready, he slowly put one of the nascent soul pills into his mouth. Instantly, he began to tremble, and his mind filled with rumbling sounds. Then, shocking energy of heaven and earth surged through him, converging in the location of his gold core. Rumble. The boundless power of the nascent soul pill slammed into him like an enraged wave, pouring into his gold core and causing his chi passageways to thrum. His gold core, which was filled with a heaven Dao aura and 9 spiritual seas, rumbled as the spiritual power of heaven and earth crashed into it, causing his cultivation base aura to immediately begin to rise. Before, he had been in the late gold core stage, and very close to the great circle. The frigid chi within him had already reached the 80% level, and once he reached the 100% level, he would achieve the breakthrough he sought. As the energy of heaven and earth filled his gold core and its 9 spiritual seas, he unleashed his frigid school will evolving incantation, causing frigid chi to pulse out rapidly. That wasn't ordinary frigid chi, it was of the frigid master level. Once he entered the great circle, his frigid chi would also break through to the frigid paragon level. As a frigid paragon, he would be able to freeze portions of Heavenspan River water. Furthermore, when combined with his other extraordinary abilities and powers, he would be able to freeze anyone in the core formation stage in place, and even kill them with a mere thought. The aura of a frigid paragon could even cause major problems for nascent soul experts. After his breakthrough into the Great Circle, the power of his Heaven Dao Gold Core would be able to unleash its true potential. It was the most powerful type of Gold Core, the type which could shake the nascent soul stage. Before, he had only been able to fight the nascent soul tribal chief by relying on godly vestige pills and his incredible fleshly body strength. But once he stepped into the Great Circle, then even if he faced ordinary soul cultivators with divine abilities of the nascent soul stage, he would definitely be able to fight them toe-to-toe. The Great Circle of the Gold Core stage. Such thoughts filled Bai with anticipation, as well as excitement. He had been waiting for this day for a long time, and therefore, he calmed his thoughts and focused on the frigid school will evolving incantation, sending pulses of frigid chi out of his body. Frigid chi filled the building, instantly freezing everything over. In fact, from the outside, the building almost looked like an enormous ice cube. As the cracking sounds rang out, Zhao Long and the others who were standing guard looked on in shock. Moments later, even some of the nearby pill furnaces were frozen just like the building. Thankfully, Bai Xiaochun had warned them ahead of time of what to expect, and they were some distance away. Were they not, they very well could have been in danger of being frozen in place. What technique does our exalted colonel cultivate? That frigid chi is so strong. It's horrifying. Zhao Long and Lu Li exchanged glances, as did everyone else. Even as they looked on, frigid chi filled more than half of the armory. Everywhere it went became a world of frozen ice. Thankfully, during the course of Bai Xiaochun's rise to prominence, the other grandmasters had all moved away. If they hadn't, they would also have been frozen in place in their residences. After enough time passed for half an incense stick to burn, the entire armory was frozen. It looked like an ice mountain that astonished not only Zhao Long and the others in the regiment, but also the other skin flayers in the area. There were even major generals with nascent soul cultivation bases who were astonished, and as for Bai Lin, he personally flew over to see what was happening. After looking down at the armory, his eyes began to shine with a strange light. If he'd possessed frigid chi of this level before, he would have been able to fight his way back to safety much more easily than he did. Eyes sparkling with approval, he quickly issued orders for more skin flayers to come and stand guard as Dharma protectors. The last to take note was the diva Chen Hichan. A beam of light shot out from the enormous eye to shine upon the armory, which closely examined the situation before retracting a moment later. This seems to be some new transformation of frigid chi. Chen Hichan murmured thoughtfully. Time passed. Bai Xiaochun's session of secluded meditation lasted for several months, during which time fighting resumed outside the Great Wall, but little more than small-scale skirmishes. Nothing like the fighting earlier that year occurred. Eventually, his months of cultivation led to a crucial moment. The energy of heaven and earth provided by the nascent soul pill had converged in his gold core, causing his spiritual seas to vibrate as frigid chi completely froze his gold core. From the look of it, his core was transforming into an ice core. By this point, the gold core was more than 90% iced up, and pulsed with a freezing aura that left Bai Xiaochun motionless and seemingly frozen. Another 3 days passed. That evening, when the final bit of the gold core came to be covered with ice, Bai Xiaochun's gold core truly had transformed into an ice core. Rumbling sounds echoed out in his mind as his eyes snapped open. At the same time, boundless streams of energy erupted out from inside of him. Cultivation base breakthrough. No longer was he in the late gold core stage, he was now in the Great Circle. It worked, he shouted, his eyes gleaming with strange light. As of this moment, he could sense that the golden ice core inside of him contained frigid chi that vastly surpassed anything from before. Furthermore, as that chi flowed through him, it didn't harm him in the least. He slowly extended his right hand, causing a stream of frigid chi to emerge from his fingertip. Instantly, the layers of ice around him began to tremble, as though an incredible pressure had suddenly descended onto the existing ice, a pressure from the emperor of all freezing things. Instantly, more ice began to build up in the armory, causing all of the cultivators who had been standing guard to back up to avoid it. Frigid paragon. Bai Xiaochun murmured, his expression the same as ever as he looked thoughtfully at his fingertip. For some reason, it felt as if some unexplainable transformation was occurring to the ice core inside of him. It was almost as if something were growing inside. A thoughtful expression appeared on his face. Although he couldn't be sure if something really was inside of the ice core, he could definitely sense some familiar fluctuations, and was certain that if he made another breakthrough, the results would be astonishing. It almost seems like control power, he murmured. Wait, I get it. Since I cultivate the frigid school will evolving incantation, and have just made a major breakthrough, then I most likely have will growing inside of the ice core. Bai Xiaochun already had his own speculations and understanding regarding the so-called will. After a bit of time, he suppressed his curiosity. The answer would come when his willpower was eventually brought out into the world. Then he would know for sure. My cultivation base is now in the great circle of the gold core stage. Next is my undying live forever technique. The strength of the nascent soul pill had already pushed him into the great circle, but there was still a bit of power left, which he could transform into life force. These nascent soul pills really live up to their reputation. What a pity I don't have the medicine formula. Of course, based on what I can tell, main ingredient is almost certainly immortal birthing grass. Immortal birthing grass was a near-extinct type of medicinal plant whose primary function was to provide life force power. In the legends, that type of life force could be used to become an immortal. Of course, that wasn't true at all, and yet, it went to show how valuable immortal birthing grass was. From what I can tell, as long as I prevent the nascent soul pill from taking my core and forming a nascent soul, then I can absorb the life force with my undying live forever technique, and make a huge advancement. The third level of the undying codex is the undying tendons. I've already cultivated it in both arms and both legs, and am lacking only in the torso and head. The requirements for the torso are significant. After a moment of thought, he looked at the second nascent soul pill, gritted his teeth, and put it in his mouth. Anyone on the outside who saw him consume a second nascent soul pill would have been completely flabbergasted. For one thing, nascent soul pills were incredibly valuable, and furthermore, few people would ever need to consume more than one to make their breakthrough. As soon as he consumed the second pill, the energy of heaven and earth erupted out into his chi passageways. Almost immediately, it began to head toward his ice core, where normally speaking, it would shatter the core and begin to form a nascent soul. However, as soon as the energy began to speed toward the ice core, Bai Xiaochun's eyes flickered, and he unleashed his undying live forever technique. Rumbling sounds could be heard as a huge vortex formed in his torso, and a shocking gravitational force sprang into being. In the blink of an eye, all of the energy of heaven and earth veered off course and began to pour into that vortex. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.